Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us today for the webinar on our Field Songs project and the importance of Syrian farmers' cultural heritage for sustainable development in the Middle East. I'm so sorry for the wait. I hope we haven't kept you waiting for too long. We're being hosted today by the Council for British Research in the Levant, to whom we're very grateful. My name is Anne Zons. I'm a British Academy postdoctoral fellow at the University of Edinburgh, and I'm the co-investigator of the Field Songs project. In the first hour, you will hear from members of our project team about the conceptual underpinnings of the Field Songs project and about some of the outcomes and implications for policy. In a nutshell, the Field Songs project was a one-year project between the University of Edinburgh's One Health Field Network and two Syrian-run organizations based in Gaziantep, Turkey, and it's funded by the UKI Arts and Humanities Research Council. As I said, in the second hour, we will open up the floor to your questions and comments, so please stay tuned. Before we dive right in, we would like to welcome you all in the name of the project's partners in the project, that is the One Health Field Network, Syrian Academic Expertise, and Douzan Art and Culture. And I will first call on Professor Lisa Bowden from the University of Edinburgh. Professor Bowden is an expert on veterinary public health. She holds the chair of population medicine and veterinary public health policy at Edinburgh's Global Academy of Agriculture and Food Systems. She is also the founder of the One Health Field Network and the principal investigator of the Field Songs project. So Lisa, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Anne. I'll just share my screen and just bring up a couple of slides. Just let me know if you can see them properly. Content? Okay. What I'd like to say, just to start, is to thank everybody for attending this webinar and to welcome you to the project. And just introduce, if you like, something about the One Health Field Network, as Anne said, which was established in 2019. I think just very briefly, it's important to start with the idea of thinking about food security as an all-encompassing One Health issue. We're thinking about food security as underpinning human health through human nutrition, animal health through animal agricultural practices, and planetary health and One Health through the impacts that food production has on the environment and also society. And in particular, our focus in this network is really about food security in fragile, conflict-affected states where food security is particularly risky and precarious. So this One Health Field Network has an aim really of bringing together diverse, multidisciplinary expertise to increase food system resilience in both short and long-term sustainable development in fragile and complex settings, and as well as recognizing the importance of transdisciplinary work. The aim of our project is really about trying to build on past and current experiences of food security to help build a sustainable local food future that's really specific to the affected region. So this One Health Field Network is seeking to mobilize knowledge within both a local and global network of researchers, practitioners, and decision makers to make successful transition away from humanitarian provision of short-term food supplies and agricultural inputs into long-term contingency planning. And so this field network project really, if you're looking at this slide, is really emphasizing the importance really of tangible cultural heritage as an important first step in order to reconnect academics who happen to be in exile into decision-making pathways. So I'm going to pause there and just acknowledge too how grateful that we are in order to partner with the Douzan Arts and Culture, the Syrian Academic Expertise Group, and of course the different partners within the University of Edinburgh, and acknowledge the many voices that are part of our network. There's probably more than 40 or 50 odd people who are involved, who are working together as part of this broader work. Okay, and I'll stop sharing there and point you to our website. I'll come back to that at the end of this session.
Thank you very much, Lisa. So I would next like to call on Dr. Shaher Abdellatif, the head of Syrian Academic Expertise, which is a network of Syrian experts and academics based in Turkey. Dr. Abdellatif holds a PhD in hydroponics and biotechnology from Humboldt University in Berlin. And since 2015, he has worked in Turkey and northern Syria on issues related to food security and higher education. And Shaher is going to welcome you in the name of Syrian Academic Expertise now. Shaher, the floor is yours.
شكرا آن. المقدمة راح تقدمها الدكتورة إسراء.
صباح الخير جميعا. رحب بالحضور. حابة أعرف عن منظمة الخبرات الأكاديمية. هي مجموعة أو خلينا نقول شبكة من الخبراء السوريين والأكاديميين الموجودين في سوريا وفي خارج سوريا. بدأ التعاون مع جامعة أدنبرا ومنظمة كارا سوريا منذ تقريبا 2019-2018. كان بداية هدف تأسيس المنظمة هو الدراسات البحثية والأكاديمية في مجال أيضا بناء القدرات وتطوير القدرات من خلال التدريبات العلمية والعملية، بالإضافة إلى الأبحاث المشاريع التنمية. من أبرز المشاريع التي بدأنا بالتعاون مع جامعة أدنبرا كان في عام 2019 تقريبا. كان في هناك مشروع حول العمالة الزراعية في دول الجوار أو التي لجأ إليها اللاجئين السوريين في كل من لبنان وسوريا وتركيا والأردن. أيضا بدأنا كان لدينا أبحاث ودراسات مختلفة. بدأت الشبكة الأكاديميين السوريين في أبحاثنا في بحث الحقول الزراعية أو التي بدأنا به مع جامعة أدنبرا. كان عن طريق الزيارات الميدانية للمزارعين. كونا شبكة من المزارعين للتواصل معهم. قمنا بالزيارات الميدانية. تناقشنا حول الخبرة الزراعية التي قام بها المزارعون بنقلها إلى تركيا. من ثم بدأ العمل بهذا المشروع وقمنا بالانتهاء منه. أيضا من بعض المشاريع التي قامت بها منظمة الخبرات كان لدينا مشروع التنمية المستدامة، وهو مفهوم جديد عبارة عن مشروع للتعافي المبكر من خلال الحدائق المدرسية والحدائق المنزلية. تم التعاون في هذا المشروع مع منظمة مالتيزر. لدينا أيضا مشروع كان مع جامعة ساسكس، وهو عبارة عن مدونة بودكاست، عبارة عن مدونة أصوات زراعية. قام الخبراء السوريين بموضوعات زراعية. قدم الخبراء السوريين موضوعات زراعية مختلفة إرشادية حول الخدمات الزراعية والتوصيات العلمية والعملية لتطوير القطاع الزراعي وتعزيز الأمن الغذائي والتنمية المستدامة. بالإضافة حاليا لدينا المشروع الحالي، وهو البناء قدرات النشطاء المدنيين، وذلك لتحقيق تنمية المجتمع وبناء السلام. هذا أبرز المواضيع والأبحاث والنشاطات اللي قامت المنظمة بها. يمكنكم الاطلاع طبعا عن طريق موقعنا على الدراسات البحثية للمنظمة وعلى مواقع التواصل الاجتماعي أيضا. شكرا. طب أنا أنتقل إليك.
Thank you so much, Dr. Esra. Finally, we have with us this morning Mr. Rami Mahabe, the founder and director of Douzan Art and Culture. Since 2019, he has turned Douzan into a hub for cultural activities for Syrian refugees in Gaziantep. And Mr. Mahabe has a lot of experience working on cultural projects all over the Middle East, including in countries such as Syria, Jordan, Lebanon, and Turkey. So Rami, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Anne. Hello, everybody, and thanks for being with us today. I will introduce Douzan Art and Culture, which is a Syrian cultural organization, has been launched in Turkey in 2019 to enable Syrians to build their contemporary cultural identity through preserving cultural memory, providing spaces for interaction, and building capacities for youth, and also enhancing solidarity and cooperation to build a Syrian cultural future between the heritage and modernity. So we work in Douzan art and culture based on 3 keywords: documenting, interacting, and empowering. We document the Syrian art history and intangible cultural heritage, not just in the aim to document and archive using digital archives actually, but also to use this archive to provide opportunity for Syrian communities over the world to interact with their to providing Syrian communities over the world to interact with their history, their memories through these archives, and also to interact with each others, and also empowering youth in the field of art and culture by providing them with the contemporary tools, artistic tools, and also transferring the knowledge of the heritage and the history to new generations. So we have 3 or 4 main programs, each program focusing on different type of art. The Field Songs project, it's one of the projects under NOTA program, which is focusing on Syrian music and folklore dances in Syria. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Rami. So now, since you've met us all, in the next 40 minutes or so, we will give you a taster from our Field Songs project. And we will start by playing you an extract from the documentary movie that we prepared as part of this project. I'll play you the documentary in a part of the documentary in a second. If you want to watch it in full, you can also access it via the link that our research assistant Martine has posted in the chat. So the documentary is available for free online on our website. After the short extract from the documentary, we will then discuss some of the aspects of the Field Songs project. I will start by talking a little bit about the ethnographic research methods and the ethical considerations that went into realizing the project. So how were the data for this project collected? I will then pass the mic to Dr. Shaha Abdellatif, who will give you an overview of the importance of agriculture for Syrians before and after 2011. Rami Mahaba will zoom in on the issue of cultural heritage during conflict and displacement. And finally, Professor Bowden will bring all these different strands of the Field Songs project together under, that is, agriculture and cultural heritage within a One Health framework. So I'll start you off now and will just show you a couple of minutes from the documentary that was produced as part of this project.
وحمل العديد من السوريين بذور النباتات المفضلة لديهم ومعرفتهم الزراعية معهم عندما اضطروا إلى مغادرة وطنهم بعد عام 2011. ولا يزال التراث الزراعي غير المادي للسوريين واضحا لليوم في عادات اللاجئين حول الطهي والأكل والأزياء والقصص والأغاني.
وتلقط بحي انطتنا وتلقط بحي انطتنا وغير الضحك واللي يعيب يا زين مع ضوتنا ولما نخلص الحصاد راحت وخلتنا والود والضحكة واللي يعيق خسكار برية.
يوم كنت أطلع على النفط أحياناً كنا نستعين بمثل هيك حبل وصلة بتلفها دائما قبل النفط ويعني مع إني بنية كنا نتشبهها وأطلع. تطلعيها شوي. أيوة إنها نفط رجلين يعني هلا الفراغ تبع الذكر بمسكه اطلع بيه لفوق بس بالعصا بعمل فيه هيك لينزل طبعا ينزل على اصول التمر اذا ما لا بيحمل بس بتطلع خايسه يعني ما بطلع فيها عجبه يعني اذا بتمطر عليها الدنيا بتعفن ما بتطول لهيك جبالنا نلقح.
جمع مشروع أغاني الحقول في عام 2002.
I hope this short snippet from the documentary has got you interested and curious about it. Again, if you would like to watch the complete movie, you can access it for free via our website. The links are in the chat. I'll just share my screen again to bring up my slides, and I'll talk a bit more about how the data for the project was collected. The reason why we wanted to start with a short extract from the documentary is that this very short snippet highlights the rich and varied forms that Syrian farmers' agricultural heritage can take. In the short extract, you heard stories, you also heard about songs, you heard about embodied memories, the memory of the lady who climbed up the palm trees when she was just a little girl. That was the kind of data that we collected, but we also, of course, looked at material objects. Some Syrian refugees brought objects to Turkey, for example, traditional dresses that they had made at home. We also looked a lot at pictures on people's phones. And I wanted to start with this because it highlights the importance of a multimedia and a multi-sensory approach to really capture the richness, the wealth of Syrian farmers' still existing cultural heritage. And as the ethnographer on the team, I wanted to talk a little bit about the ethnographic fieldwork. That is how we met these farmers who are portrayed in the documentary and who will be portrayed in the seminar. And that was ethnographic fieldwork, not just in the academic term, in the academic sense, the way that anthropologists often say they do fieldwork, but it was also fieldwork in a very literal sense, because they spend a lot of time going to the fields, going to orchards, going to agricultural work sites to meet with Syrian farmers all over Turkey. So I'll just try to move my slide forward. So just to give you a sense of what we did for the Field Songs project. The Field Songs project was a one-year project in 2022 with a number of research activities all over Turkey. To capture the ongoing meaning and relevance of agricultural heritage for displaced Syrian farmers, we conducted two-day workshops with each time around 20 Syrian farmers in Gaziantep in the south of Turkey, once in spring and once in summer 2022. In addition, we also conducted 2 weeks of ethnographic fieldwork with the Syrian farmers twice, again, once in spring and once in summer 2022. And this ethnographic fieldwork proper took us to agricultural work sites all over Turkey. So you can see locations on the Black Coast, in Trabzon and Rize, in Western Turkey, in Adana, in Central Turkey, in Anatolia, in Niğde, all the way to Gaziantep, Şanlıurfa, and then locations very close to the Syrian border in the south, in Islahiye and Rehanli. In addition, and the way you have to imagine this ethnographic fieldwork is that it really consisted in field visits where we would go visit farmers for a day, we would conduct interviews, visit their work sites, also meet their families, visit their homes, and get a better sense of what it means to be a Syrian farmer in Turkey today. In addition to that, as a team, we also conducted key stakeholder interviews with local and international policymakers and humanitarian actors, including members of the municipality of Adana, which is very active in supporting Syrian farming activities, but also, for example, the WFP Gaziantep Food Security Cluster Coordinator. And finally, and you've already seen the outcome of this, we were accompanied by a Syrian film crew, especially during the second round of field visits and workshops. And the Syrian filmmaker came with us to the workshop in Gaziantep and then also to different field sites in the south of Turkey, in Şanlıurfa, Rehanli, and Islahiye. Now, who are the participants in this research? It was really important for us to go beyond stereotypes of Syrian refugees as exploitative refugee labor. Of course, there are Syrians working under very precarious conditions in Turkish agriculture today, but it was important for us to portray the wide spectrum of Syrian farming activities in the host country. So the research included people living as day laborers, sometimes literally living in tent settlements, all the way up to very successful and affluent Syrian business owners and Syrian agricultural engineers working in high-tech agricultural labs also run by Syrians. So something that's very important to us and that you will hopefully also see in the documentary is that there is not just one profile of Syrian refugee working in agriculture in Turkey today. Actually, there is a variety of profiles. It was very important to us to also include Syrian women. One thing you might already know is that Syrian women have always played a central role in Syrian agriculture, working on the fields, but also providing much needed labor at home. And it was very important to us to portray these women and again, show the different roles that they can take on in agriculture, be it as workers on the fields, but also, for example, as home-based producers, as entrepreneurs running catering businesses, and so on. That also meant that, especially when it came to filming the documentary, that we had to negotiate boundaries and be careful to respect cultured and gendered sensitivity. So, for example, in the documentary, you will notice that often female interviewees are not portrayed from the front. If they did not consent, you would not see their faces, but instead you would see, we would have a zoom in on their hands working. So in addition to this wide spectrum of Syrian farmers, we also sought to portray diverse agricultural economies. As I'm sure you all know, Turkey is a huge country. It's home to multiple different agricultural economies with different types of products. So for example, we visited Syrian farmers working with roses, with different types of vegetables, with wheat, with tea, for example, on the Black Sea. We visited Syrian beekeepers, people working in dairy and cheese production, and so on. And it was important for us to showcase in the research and also in the documentary that Syrian farmers have found a place for themselves, have carved out places for themselves in all these different agricultural economies and on different stages of the agricultural supply chain as workers, but also as intermediaries, as business owners, and increasingly also as traders. What you will hopefully also see in the documentary is that Syrian farmers in Turkey live in a diverse set of living and working situations. As I said, this goes all the way from people residing in informal tent settlements on agricultural grounds to people living and working in the city of Gaziantep, but still being involved in forms of urban gardening and urban forms of food production. So that's just to get you a little bit curious about the kind of people that you can encounter in this research and get you interested in the diverse situations that we found during fieldwork. And I just wanted to end by sharing some insights from the field. And by the way, what you can see on the left is a typical traditional Syrian meal that was prepared for us by one of the families in our research, who now lives in the city of Gaziantep, but originally comes from Tadmor, from Palmyra, where they used to work in farming. And this is one of the families that has brought an amazing amount of knowledge and practices to their new living situation in a big Turkish city. So here are some of the main insights from the field. The one thing, and I'm sure that Rami will talk about this a bit more, is that there is not one homogeneous agricultural heritage. On the contrary, what we realized through the workshops and through the field visits is that there were huge regional differences when it comes to agricultural practice before 2011. So in the workshop and in the field visits, we encountered Syrian farmers who are originally from Aleppo, from Deir ez-Zor, from Homs, from Tadmor, from Palmyra, and so on. And we realized very soon that people from different regions brought different practices, and even sometimes brought different types of vocabulary. So especially in the workshops, one thing we found is that sometimes Syrian farmers from different regions would have to translate specialist vocabulary to each other. That was a really important insight for us, and it also highlighted to us that having these kind of workshops and this kind of research on cultural heritage now means that you can create new opportunities for bringing these Syrian farmers together who before 2011 might have had very little contact. We also understood our research activities as an opportunity for knowledge exchange, in the sense that many Syrian farmers who are now in their middle age complained about the generational disconnect. So in many cases, people who are now in their 40s and 50s and 60s had worked and lived in agriculture for most of their adult lives, but their children now live in Turkey. They often live in big cities. They go to Turkish schools and sometimes university, and they know often very little about their parents' agricultural lifestyles. So these workshops were also an opportunity for us and for the participants to start new conversations within their own families, and to start bridging the gap between those with lived experience of agriculture in Syria and the next generation of Syrians in Turkey. This said, we also realized during the research that when you seek to document heritage, you also start documenting loss. So this is something that you might see in the documentary, as well as that often Syrian farmers would start singing a song, or they would start talking about a practice, and then they would just not remember. And in fact, the workshops in particular also highlighted the issue of faulty memory and forgetting, and the need to talk to even older Syrians. So in many cases, participants in the research who are themselves in the middle of their lives, who are themselves in their 40s and 50s, told us that we should actually be talking to their parents' generation, who are now in their 70s and 80s, but who were often left behind in Syria. And I think this is exactly what we're going to do for one of our next projects, is to do WhatsApp interviews with an even older generation of Syrians inside the country, because we realized that if you want to get through to these older forms of heritage, then you have to talk to not just one generation of farmers, but multiple generations of farmers. Heritage, as I hope you will find in the documentary, is important not just as a bridge to the past. This cultural heritage that you will find documented through our research and in a documentary is about a sense of shared identity. It's about community, a sense of belonging, and about social cohesion. It is about what people brought from Syria. But importantly, this is relevant to people, to the people included in this research, not just because it allows them to think back, but also because it allows them to think ahead and to plan for the future. And one of the main insights from the project perhaps is that Syrian refugees in Turkey actively keep this heritage alive, because they think that they will be able to benefit from it one day when they return to Syria and rebuild their home country. And on a final note, and as an anthropologist, I just wanted to highlight that we don't have a romanticized understanding of heritage, in the sense that we consider it something stable or unified. On the contrary, what the research brought out is that heritage can be contentious, and that sometimes people do not agree what their heritage should be and who should represent it. But these kind of discussions, these ongoing discussions in the Syrian community in Turkey about what represents heritage, who gets to speak for Syrian heritage, these discussions are really important because they show that their cultural heritage is still a living thing. And I think I'll leave it here. And I'll just pass the word to Dr. Shaher Abdelatif, who will give us a bit of more of a sense of Syrian agriculture as an economy in Syria before and after 2011. So, Shaher, the floor is yours now.
شكرا آن. أتمنى أن يكون الصوت مسموع والشاشة مرئية لكم. شكرا. نعم، إذا لمعرفة أهمية التراث الزراعي ومدى غناه، فسوف أقدم على عجالة دور السوريين بشكل عام في القطاع الزراعي قبل 2011، قبل بداية الصراع وأثناءه أو حتى الآن. كان للسوريين دور كبير في القطاع الزراعي قبل عام 2011، ومن الجدير ذكره بأن سوريا كانت تعتبر من البلدان المتطورة نسبيا فيما يتعلق بالإنتاج الزراعي وقطاع الأمن الغذائي مقارنة مع دول الجوار في الشرق الأوسط. وعلى سبيل المثال كانت تعتبر من الدول التي حققت الاكتفاء الذاتي، ولا سيما من فيما يتعلق بإنتاج المحاصيل الرئيسية كالقمح والشعير، حيث بلغ إنتاج القمح أكثر من 4 مليون طن. يعني علينا أن نتصور هذا الرقم الكبير قبل الصراع، وحيث كانت سوريا تعتبر مصدر لهذا المحصول الغذائي المهم. أيضا تتميز بإنتاج عالي من المحاصيل الزراعية واستخدام الأراضي الزراعية من خلال تقنيات تعتبر نسبيا حديثة في المنطقة، وأيضا فيما يتعلق بإدارة الإنتاج وما إلى ذلك. أيضا السوريين كمزارعين وكعمال كان من المعروف جدا هو ذهابهم أو سفرهم لدول الجوار، ولا سيما لبنان، دول الخليج، الأردن، للعمل في القطاع الزراعي، وبالتالي اكتساب خبرات جديدة ونقل الخبرات التي تعلموها من خلال التعاقب الأجيال من الآباء والأجداد. إذا كل هذا يعطينا فكرة عن المدى الذي كان وصل إليه الخبرة الزراعية والمهارات الزراعية والتراث الزراعي للسوريين قبل بداية الأحداث. لفهم أكثر للتغيرات التي حدثت بعد عام 2011، فإنه من المؤسف أن السوريين لم يتعرضوا فقط لعوامل طبيعية كتغير المناخ الذي يشهده العالم أجمع بما فيه من ارتفاع لدرجات الحرارة وموجات الجفاف والآفات الأمراض وأيضا إزالة الغابات وما إلى ذلك من المخاطر البيئية أو المتعلقة في المناخ، لكن أيضا تعرضوا أو يتعرضون منذ عام 2011 إلى عوامل أخرى تتعلق بالهجرة والنزوح وضعف الحوكمة، ضعف الوصول للمدخلات الإنتاج الزراعي، وبشكل عام تراجع البحث العلمي والتعليم وغياب لسياسات حماية التنوع الحيوي وما إلى آخره. أي أننا في هذا الحالة نواجه يعني عوامل بيئية وعوامل غير بيئية تؤثر بشكل كبير أو أثرت بشكل كبير على الإنتاج الزراعي والأمن الغذائي في سوريا وللسوريين بشكل عام. الآن عن دور السوريين بشكل عام بعد عام 2011، بالتأكيد بأن السنوات الصراع الطويلة والنزوح الذي أدى إلى أكثر من 5 مليون نازح في دول الجوار، معظم هؤلاء النازحين أو نسبة كبيرة منهم هم من العاملين في القطاع الزراعي، ولعله من الجدير بالذكر بأن القطاع الزراعي مهم. لماذا نتحدث عنه؟ لأنه يشكل فرصة أو كان يشكل فرصة كبيرة للعمل وللدخل وأيضا لتأمين الأمن الغذائي. بعد 2011 ونتيجة هذه الظروف وكل هذه العوامل، تحول القطاع الزراعي من الاكتفاء الذاتي إلى أنه غير قادر على إنتاج كميات كافية من الغذاء للسوريين. وحسب الإحصاءات الأخيرة فإن هناك أكثر من 12 مليون سوري هم غير مؤمنين غذائيا. لكن من ناحية أخرى أيضا فإن النزوح، وكما ذكرت زميلتي آن قبل قليل، أضاف فرصة للتبادل بين الخبرات بين المزارعين وبين السوريين بشكل عام من مناطق مختلفة، وبالتالي كانت فرصة بالنسبة لهم لتطوير هذه الخبرات أو اكتساب خبرات جديدة، وأيضا الاعتماد على هذه الخبرات وهذا التراث من أجل البقاء على قيد الحياة أو من أجل إنتاج الاستمرار في إنتاج الغذاء تأمين الدخل وبالتالي تحسين ظروفهم المعيشية. كل هذه كانت أو مكنت السوريين كما ذكرت من اكتساب على سبيل المثال تقنيات جديدة، سواء كان في داخل سوريا من خلال النزوح الداخلي والتبادل، أو من خلال النزوح في دول الجوار وبالتالي اكتساب خبرات جديدة من هذه الدول. سأتحدث هنا بشكل مختصر فيما يتعلق بالحالة التي شاهدناها من خلال مشروع أغاني الحقول في تركيا، ومن خلال الجولات الميدانية والزيارات والمقابلات وورشات العمل. فوجدنا بأن السوريين بشكل عام إما أن يعملوا بشكل يومي كعمال زراعيين في الحقول في تركيا، أو بأنهم يقودون بعض هذه المزارع كعمال أساسيين. أيضا لعبوا دورا كبيرا من خلال الوساطة في بعض العمليات التسويقية وإنشاء شركات زراعية أو شركات خاصة لهم، أو العمل في التجارة، وبالتالي أيضا ساهموا في تعزيز سلسلة الغذاء وسلسلة الأمن الغذائي. أيضا معظمهم وكما هو العادة يعني يعملوا أو عملوا في إنتاج الخضار، ولا سيما الخضار التي تلبي احتياجات السوريين النازحين أو الموجودين في تركيا. أيضا قاموا بتأسيس بعض المزارع الحديثة التي تحتوي على البيوت المحلية، وأيضا فيما يتعلق بتربية الثروة الحيوانية والمناحل وإنتاج الفطر أو إنتاج نباتات الزينة. وهنا أذكر أحد السوريين الذي قدم من دمشق واعتمد على خبرته التي نقلها معه، وبالتالي أسس منشأة زراعية ناجحة في تركيا في أضنة لإنتاج نباتات الزينة. أيضا يعني بعض النشاطات كانت لتأسيس مزارع حديثة كإنتاج وتربية الوردة الدمشقية المشهورة، والتي هي جزء كبير وتعني الكثير للسوريين، بالإضافة إلى مخابر عالية التقنية. وهنا نلاحظ هذا التنوع، يعني بدءا من الخبرات البسيطة والمهارات البسيطة التي جلبها معها أو حملها معهم السوريين إلى الخبرات العالية. أيضا وجدنا بحالة متطورة من إنشاء بعض الجمعيات التعاونية لتصنيع الغذاء أو حتى منتجات أخرى في الريحانية. كل هذه النشاطات ساهمت حقيقة بشكل كبير في توليد دخل لهؤلاء الأسر وللعاملين. أيضا الاستمرار في ممارسة العمل الزراعي، ولعلني أذكر هنا الكثير من المزارعين الذين التقيناهم كانوا سعداء جدا لمجرد أنهم حافظوا على عملهم الزراعي واستمروا في العمل في الزراعة الذي يشكل جزء كبير من هويتهم. أيضا كان له دور كبير في صحتهم النفسية لمجرد أنهم يعملون في العمل الزراعي ويمارسوا ما تعلموه. أيضا تعلموا خبرات جديدة، وكما ذكرت ساهموا في سلاسل الغذاء والتزويد الغذائي والأمن الغذائي، وبالتالي كان لهم دور كبير في التنمية والزراعية وتطور الإنتاج الزراعي في تركيا، والذي نأمل أيضا أن يحملوا معهم هذه الخبرات عندما يعودوا إلى سوريا في القريب العاجل. من بعض التوصيات التي يمكن أن نخرج بها من هذا المشروع فعلى سبيل المثال نذكر الاهتمام أكثر في موضوع الدعم المشاريع التنموية والتدريبات قصيرة ومتوسطة الأجل بحيث تمكن السوريين والمزارعين السوريين في تركيا من تأسيس منشآتهم الخاصة. أيضا الاعتماد على التدريبات ليس فقط من أجل المهارات الزراعية، وإنما قد تكون هناك مهارات أخرى كاللغة، تعلم اللغة وهي وسيلة للتواصل والاندماج مع أقرانهم من المزارعين والمجتمع أيضا التركي، أو كتدريبات لها تتعلق حول التمويل والإدارة وما شابه ذلك. أيضا وجدنا عامل مهم جدا لتحسين وصول السوريين للأراضي وأيضا الأسواق والحصول على الدعم المالي أو القروض المالية. أيضا دعم المبادرات التي يقودها السوريين، المبادرات الزراعية مثل الجمعيات التعاونية والشركات وما إلى ذلك. أيضا من الأمور المهمة أن يتم تحسين التواصل ما بين العمال الزراعيين وأيضا أصحاب العمل في تركيا من خلال إنشاء منصة لتبادل الخبرات. على يمين الصورة نلاحظ يعني وجبة أو تقليدية للسوريين نسميها المحمرة مع زيت الزيتون. أردت من خلال هذه الصورة الإشارة لأن هذا النشاط البسيط يكاد يكون معروف في كل بيت سوري، وعند تحضير هذه الوجبة لا تجتمع الأسرة فحسب وإنما أيضا الجيران، وبالتالي هي كانت وسيلة للتواصل والاندماج المجتمعي بشكل كبير. هذه الوجبة وهذه المهارة يحملها السوريين أينما ذهبوا، ولذلك أنصحكم بشكل كبير في تجريبها وتذوقها. شكرا لكم، أعود إليك الآن.
Thank you very much, Dr. Shaher. So now that Shaher has spoken a bit more about the economic sides of Syrian agriculture, we're now moving on to the cultural dimension of Syrian agricultural production. And I'm passing the mic to Mr. Hami Makhaba again.
Thank you so much. And hello again. So can you see my presentation? Okay. So I will start with like saying what is the intangible cultural heritage mean? The intangible cultural heritage as UNESCO is all practices, expressions, knowledge and skills transferred from the old generations, including oral traditions, expressions, including language, performing arts, social practices, rituals, festivals, and traditional crafts. So, according to UNESCO, the cultural heritage provide people affected by conflicts sense of identity and belonging, and also promote the mutual appreciation of the cultural diversity, which is lead to promoting dialogues, understanding, reconciliation, and also peace. But the mass displacements caused by the wars or conflicts affects directly the intangible or the cultural heritage in general, by affecting or increasing the threats and the opportunity to lose this cultural heritage, because when people migrate or displace, moving from place to another, they lose a lot of their traditional ceremonies, rituals, specifically the rituals or the ceremonies related to the places, their places. And also the migrations or the displacement itself interrupts their continuity with this, like practicing these rituals and ceremonies. This situation applied on Syria after 2011. Now there is like more than 8 million Syrians outside Syria and distributed in more than like 10 countries. And also the around 16 million Syrians inside Syria, but they are distributed in different controlled authorities regions. So they still have borders, I mean, between Syrians, even inside Syria, not just the borders, I mean, between the countries, but also ideological, political gaps, and also cultural gaps caused by internal displacement and migrations. So the cultural heritage, it's are products of the place, time, and people, and the people continuing always like promoting their culture and producing their culture and updating their culture. But the most important dimension in the intangible or the cultural heritage is the human dimension, which is affected the sustainable development. So through field songs projects, as I mentioned before, for 3 keywords, we try with our partners to apply these 3 keywords on the work method of this project by documenting the intangible cultural heritage through documenting songs, agricultural songs or field songs, and also the traditions and the stories behind these songs. Also, not just in the aim of documenting the songs in different form, digital form, also to like gathering Syrians to interact with this intangible heritage and to interact with each other through conducting workshops, as Anne mentioned, in Gaziantep, gathering Syrian musicians and farmers to relink them with their history and their heritage through singing together, telling stories or sharing stories between different or from different regions. And not just in the aim of interaction, also to transfer the knowledge. We document the intangible cultural heritage to transfer the knowledge between the old generations and the new generations, specifically outside Syria, to empower the new generations through using their heritage and their culture and their history. So through this project, we document or we recorded more than 20 songs. We collected these songs from northern Syria. And also we produced 2 short videos, including songs from the fields and also some traditions of the agricultural works. Also, this video is recorded inside Syria. And also we conducted 2 workshops, as I mentioned, gathering Syrian musicians with the farmers. And also we produce a documentary film to show the stories behind these traditions and the feelings behind these traditions and heritage. You can also check some of the songs on Nota social media pages. Finally, I want to mention like the cultural heritage, or the importance of the cultural heritage, which is like shows in the influence of the cultural heritage on sustainable development on different levels, on economic levels, social, environments, and also even like according to UNESCO studies and reports, the intangible cultural heritage through promoting dialogues between the community and the appreciation of diversity, making the return of refugees faster, and promoting the social cohesion faster than the normal situation, specifically when we are talking about the conflict periods such as Syria. So thank you again, and the mic is yours.
Thank you very much, Rami. And now to our final speaker for the webinar, Professor Lisa Bojan, who will bring together these different strands, the economic side and the cultural side of Syrian agriculture, together within the umbrella of a One Health field framework. So Lisa, the floor is yours.
Thanks, and can you hear me okay, and can you see the full slide? Okay, that's great. Well, thanks a lot for the opportunity to kind of come back and to try to summarize some of the outcomes of this piece of work, but also in the context of this wider framework. And the way that this presentation is structured is to highlight some key things that I think have been picked out by the previous speakers before me, and then to try to then think about them in the context of sort of a number of different contradictions. As tempting as it might be to try to summarize something in terms of concrete policy outcomes, which is what people like to do, or what could be desirable, it's really important to sort of unearth some of the tensions that are raised when thinking about decision making. And so the starting question for ourselves and also for the audience that's online is, why does culture matter? And why is it important that we make consideration about intangible cultural heritage and try to link that with decision making around food security, which is something which is potentially highly technical, and more broadly towards sustainable development, something that is what one hopes is quite measurable. And that's the starting question. And in this presentation, I guess, when I get to the questions, what I hope that we will provoke is a bit of a discussion. And I will invite, once I come through this, just people to kind of try and contribute within the panel, but also then with the wider audience as well. So that's our starting question. And if we just go back to the idea of the One Health field network and situate this project, as I did in the beginning, of understanding why linking to the past is important for the present and understanding the long-term future. The reason for including this slide again is just to highlight that what we're trying to do is not just think about some of the technical important implications of when we're thinking about food security and agriculture, but we're also, as Rami pointed out, trying to understand, if you like, that felt experience, the emotional well-being of people in that context, which is at the nexus, if you like, of a humanitarian crisis, as well as trying to address different types of agendas around sustainability and also security when it comes to thinking about health and well-being. So this project, you've heard now a few times about the premise, but really the starting point for us, as Anne pointed out, was, and the starting question was, how does refugee intangible cultural heritage inform short and long-term development policies in Middle Eastern host countries, but also in Syria? And our answer to that hypothesis, or our proposal there, was that if we could find a way to think about traditional harvesting songs, and in particular other forms of knowledge, that by recording them and if you like, making the intangible tangible, or at least visible, that's a way of really tapping into our embodied, communal, and perhaps so far unwritten agricultural knowledge that isn't normally included in policymaker and humanitarian intervention plans. It's more challenging to include in those decision-making pathways often, but still quite an important component part of how we think about decision-making, whose decisions they may be, and what voices are heard or not heard in those cases. So, and it's also important, I just wanted to take the moment just to say, it's important to think too about the One Health Field Network and the groups that we were working with. We're very reflective on the fact that, of course, we're working on a project in a particular area, but we're reflective of the culture that we bring into the project, the intangible culture that is part of that framing of this particular research question. But our starting point collectively is to think that perhaps their prioritization of certain research cultures or disciplinary cultures or organizational cultures over other types. So, for example, thinking about different forms of knowledge which gets prioritized over others. And that, if we look back at why that might happen in terms of, again, at this nexus of the security, sustainability, and humanitarian agendas, I believe it really reflects the, perhaps, one might argue, inadequate inclusion of certain types of disciplines, so the social sciences and humanities disciplines, which in doing so reinforce our understandings, our norms, and our practices, which might have a huge impact actually on the successful implementation of One Health policies. So what I'm really saying here is that multidisciplinarity and ultimately, hopefully, transdisciplinarity is important when trying to frame problems and trying to find solutions. And this Field Songs project is really trying to answer that question of how do you bring in that type of if you like, intangible cultural heritage into that decision-making forum, where it so far perhaps isn't potentially that visible. And as I mentioned already in that first slide, recognizing too that the heritage that we bring in, our own ideas and our practices, and the voices that are around the table when we frame those questions, whether or not it's a research question, as we did in this particular project, or if we're talking about really applied work on the ground as a humanitarian question, or the way we frame that problem really reinforces what we think are values that are worth protecting, how we quantify and protect those positive values, and the ends, and in terms of what we think collectively makes for a positive experience, that is a healthy life, or if we want to tag this and align it to the Sustainable Development Goals, how we make for a better lives and livelihoods, how we eradicate poverty, how we ensure equity as an ultimate outcome that underpins and is essential to health and well-being. So that's the starting point. The Field Songs project was a very interesting project because it brought together quite a number of different groups who come from different disciplinary backgrounds, as I said. So as Anne mentioned in the beginning, my original disciplinary background is as a veterinary epidemiologist and public health specialist. But I'm coming together and working with a big team of ethnographers and other people who are taking different ways of thinking about this problem, and really coming to the conclusion that cultural heritage of displaced communities can be the basis for collective actions for an innovative approach to sustainable development. There are three slides that I want to put forward now that pose inside the idea of a policy outcome, the idea that there are perhaps contradictions and tensions that are occurring when thinking about those policy outcomes. And I'm putting them forward to you as propositions really for discussion that we can pick up on, and your discussion informs the evolution of that conversation that we're having inside this project. The first question is, whose narrative is this? When we're thinking about turning intangible cultural heritage into tangible cultural heritage, or in other words, turning something into an asset that has value, which otherwise would not necessarily have been realized as such. So from a humanitarian actor's perspective, perhaps the narrative is, and often is, that refugees, in particular displaced persons, should be enabled to expand their skills and knowledge in host countries so that they can then benefit from transferable knowledge upon their return at some point in the future, whether it's short or long term, when they return back to Syria. But the tension with that, and if you like, the other side of that conversation, is really the recognition that we come to in this project that knowledge transfer must be bidirectional. That refugees and displaced people bring their own expertise to host countries, in the field of agriculture, of course, in the context of this process, but also elsewhere. And why is that important? It's important from a decision-making perspective because we need to think really about the next question: whose values? It's clear that agricultural practices and traditions are part of Syria's intangible and I would argue tangible cultural heritage. But as I said in the first slide, the question is, when certain cultures of expertise and knowledge are privileged over others in decision making, what it might lead to, that is the inclusion or exclusion of certain types of knowledge, will influence inevitably the types of decisions that are prioritized and where investments are made. And if I could make that real, I suppose in the best case scenario, it shines a light onto a pathway towards sustainable development. But if we are privileging, for example, certain types of an evidence base which promotes quantifiable outcomes, which promotes highly technical background and expertise, which is absolutely essential. In the worst case scenario, it might result in perpetuating some inequities which were there from the beginning, which never become resolved. We can talk about that in a moment. But what's important here is that we need to think about, when we're talking about policy outcomes, what are the outcomes that are important and to whom, and who gets to decide on what they are. And if we flip to the bottom of that slide, I think that even though it's at the bottom of the slide, where I want to start with is that Syrians need to be at the center of their own conversations around their One Health outcomes. So this is, of course, a global and international project, and I'm involved in that project, but Syrians are the ones that need to be at the center of that conversation. And that their intangible cultural heritage is relating to sustainable development makes us realize that we need to think about what those outcomes are in terms of health. So thinking about moving, not just thinking about, for example, physical health and the presence or absence of disease, or the ability, if you like, to be healthy enough to work, but also thinking about mental health, as Rami pointed out, as part of a comprehensive One Health approach. And similarly, there are other potentially competing outcomes that might not necessarily go well with that. For example, if we look at outcomes around economics and livelihoods, and thinking about how we move people into work, recognizing, of course, that farmers and farm workers make an important contribution to building sustainable livelihoods in host countries like Turkey, but also recognizing that the way we work and the forms of work are important considerations too. And in the middle two bullet points, I skipped around there, is thinking about how intangible cultural heritage is really critical in terms of building social cohesion amongst displaced communities and with host communities. And the starting point of the One Health Field Network project of this project and others, that food security itself is an important and very tangible and concrete result. So I'm going to just pause there. That was very brief. I think it's important to leave some space here for discussion. I think what I might do, Anne, because I can't see the chat, so I'm going to stop sharing for now and then look, because I know that I could see some questions that were coming up potentially through the chat box. But I'd like to open it up now to the attendees. Perhaps if we can take some of those tensions, and we can start with those tensions first and then move more broadly to other questions about the project, either the logistics of the project, the intention of the project, and if you have anything that you want to ask, we can take it from there. But let's start with some of those tensions. Now, I realize I'm not sure that I can see the questions or the raised hands, but let me try and move to participants to see if I can see that.
Lisa, I think we have one raised hand from Mohammed Al-Ashma.
Okay.
So Mohammed Al-Ashma, if you would like to use the chat, or if you can put on your microphone, then please ask your question or provide your feedback in whatever language works best for you.
Thanks, Mohammed. I think you're okay. Perfect.
Hi everyone. Thank you for your presentation. Very fascinating, very amazing. I'm just curious about if this heritage or culture is only limited to, or you think, I mean, I'm just thinking about this, is limited to agriculture or also other cultural aspects of the Syrian IDPs and refugees, like handicrafts, other areas or other skills that they are bringing or developing or bringing with them or preserving, or it's only limited to these rural communities and their agriculture practices. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for the question. Perhaps what I might do is to bring that question into the larger group. I have an opinion on this, but I think I would just like the larger group. Does anyone want to take that? Rami, do you want to start?
Yes, thank you, Lisa, and thanks, Mohammed, for the question. Actually, the cultural heritage, the tangible or intangible cultural heritage, related and linked to each single aspect in our life, starting from our traditions at homes to our works, crafts, as you mentioned, handicraft, art craft, music, dances, the rituals, the traditions, our foods, drinks, everything actually considered as intangible cultural heritage. So our way to celebrate in Eid, as example, the Adha Eid or the Fitr Eid or another religious or non-religious celebrations, all of them considered as intangible cultural heritage. And all of them needs to be preserved, need to be protected, need to be not just like, I will not say archived, just because it's the idea of archive, even if in the digital era, it's that we have different kinds of archives than the before digital archives. But I will not mention just archive because you need to to protect or to preserve the intangible heritage, you need to keep practicing this heritage. And this is the most important point in preserving or safeguarding the intangible heritage, to keep practicing and to transfer this knowledge. At the end, it's knowledge, to transfer this knowledge for new generations, specifically in the Syrian situation. The new generations, they don't have, they couldn't like build or practice their own identities. So the importance of intangible cultural heritage came from these points, like the importance of transferring knowledge to our new generations, keep practicing the intangible cultural heritage, because this practicing giving us the feelings of belonging to Syrian community or belonging to Syria. Thank you.
Thanks, Rami. That was such a thoughtful comment and such an important comment about the need to continue to practice heritage as part of defining what heritage is, and recognition that heritage also is evolving as it's going. It's such an important point to make. I think Anne wants to come in with a point here, and then I'd also like to bring in Shaher afterwards if you have some feelings about that. Anne?
Yeah, Mohammed, I think that is an excellent question. And as Rami already said, I think we approached agricultural heritage in the broadest sense, including also handicraft. And I think I just wanted to, everything that Rami just said is 100% true. And I just wanted to give some more examples of what we also saw during fieldwork, during data collection. Because I think we all realized very quickly that if you wanted to understand agriculture, you could not just look at what's happening in the field or in the orchard or in the greenhouse. You also have to look at what's happening inside people's homes, right? Because homes are always, and families are connected to agricultural production. And that includes handicraft in the commercial sense. So things that families used to produce so they could sell it, but also non-commercial handicraft. So in particular, what the women at home used to produce. And I already said earlier, Syrian women have always played an important role in Syrian agriculture as workers in agriculture, but also because they kept the home life going and because they provided so much unpaid domestic labor. And just to give you two examples of practices that still continue in Turkey among Syrians until today. One is basket weaving. So that is something that a lot of Syrian agriculture women used to do before 2011 and that they still know now. And these baskets are made of agricultural products and they're used to store food inside the home. The other tradition that's still very much alive is dressmaking. So a lot of the older generation of ladies told us that in the old days, in the evenings, they would embroider their own dresses, often before they got married. And some of the women have brought these dresses with them to Turkey, and they still cherish them, and they have them in their homes, and there are attempts at reviving these embroidery traditions. So just to say that, yes, absolutely, when we talk about agricultural heritage, we don't just look at what's happening in the field, we also look at what's happening inside people's homes, and it includes all kinds of practices.
Thanks, Anne. And also an important point there, I think, coming up about heritage as an entry point into understanding different roles within households in terms of between men and women and between older generations and younger generations, and thinking about what that means in terms of the formation, if you like, of a community. May I bring in Shaher? Do you have any thoughts, or Esra, that you might want to add to around this idea, around just leading from Mohammed's question, around the importance perhaps of the heritage being linked to agriculture and food security, or the broader context of heritage?
نعم، شكرا ليزا، وشكرا محمد لهذا السؤال مهم جدا حقيقة. نحن ننظر إلى التراث الزراعي كجزء من التراث العام للمجتمع السوري، والذي لا يتجزأ ولا ينفصل عنه. ولعل التركيز في هذا البحث على التراث الزراعي نظرا لتوجه البحث بهذا الاتجاه، وكونه كما ذكرت زميلتي يعني جزء من سلسلة لبحث سابق بدأ في مستقبل الزراعة والأمن الغذائي في سوريا. لا يعني بالتأكيد التراث الزراعي عندما تحدثنا عنه كوسيلة ساعدت العديد من السوريين سواء كان داخل سوريا أو خارج سوريا في ظل هذا النزاع، ليس فقط للنجاة بحياتهم أو تأمين فرص عمل، وإنما أيضا للاستمرار في الإنتاج الزراعي. يعني لعلك تعلم بأنه الإنتاج الزراعي أو العمل في القطاع الزراعي كجزء من الهوية الثقافية السورية، ولمسنا العديد من الأمثلة كما ذكرنا. على سبيل المثال بعض النساء اللواتي يعملن في تصنيع الغذاء على الرغم من أنها ليست المهنة الرئيسية لهن، يعني بعضهن مهندسات أو معلمات أو يعملن في مهن أخرى، لكن في ظل هذه الأزمة في ظل هذا الصراع فتم العودة إلى هذا التراث واستخدامه بشكل بسيط لتأمين وسيلة يعني تأمين دخل. أيضا على سبيل المثال كما ذكرنا بأن إنتاج الخضار لأكثر من مزارع حقيقة في الريحانية وفي أورفا أيضا يعني لم تكن المهنة الرئيسية لهم، لكن كان المحفز هو التراث الاستهلاكي للغذاء واعتماد السوريين على بعض الخضار مثل الباذنجان أو يعني البامية أو ما إلى ذلك. بمعنى آخر أن التراث شكل فرصة لهؤلاء لكي يعملوا في هذا الاتجاه، وبالتالي يؤمنوا احتياجات شريحة واسعة من السوريين تعتمد في تراثها في عاداتها على منتجات خاصة لم تكن متوفرة في السوق التركي، أو حتى يعني لدينا أمثلة في ألمانيا وفي أوروبا نجد الكثير من الأشخاص الذين عملوا في هذا المجال بالاعتماد على ما تعلموه من عبر السنوات الطويلة أو الأجيال. دعني أقول أيضا بأن تربية النحل على سبيل المثال، وهي إحدى الحالات التي زرناها في غازي عنتاب، المربي النحل الذي كان يعمل حاليا في تربية النحل لم تكن أيضا مهمته أو مهنته الرئيسية، لكنها مهنة تعلمها من آبائه وأجداده. وحقيقة هنا أود أن ننوه أن تربية النحل في سوريا عموما تعتبر مهنة شعبية، يعني لا توجد مراكز أو شركات كبيرة متخصصة فيها، وإنما هي مهنة تنتقل من الآباء إلى الأبناء وهكذا. فإذا نعم التراث الزراعي عندما تحدثنا عنه لأهميته كجزء من التراث السوري بشكل عام وجزء من الهوية. أود التأكيد على نقطة مهمة أيضا أخرى، وهذا من خلال أيضا الجولات الحقلية التي عملناها وزرنا العديد من المزارعين أو السوريين بشكل عام الذين كانوا يعني سعداء في حصولهم على فرصة للعمل، وبالتالي الاستمرار في ممارسة العمل الزراعي الذي يعطيهم دفع نفسي وتحسين الحالة الصحية، وأيضا كان وسيلة للاندماج في المجتمع من خلال العمل في المزارع أو تأسيس بعض الأعمال الزراعية والاقتصادية إلى آخره. فأعتقد يعني من الناحية إن صح التعبير العملية، فكانت العودة إلى التراث الزراعي وسيلة مهمة للاستمرار ولتحسين معيشة شريحة واسعة من السوريين في تركيا وفي سوريا وفي دول الجوار أيضا، وأيضا فرصة للاستمرار في الحفاظ على هذا التراث. فعندما تعمل تستمر في ممارسة هذه النشاطات، ولذلك يعني كانت أحد التوصيات هو تمكين السوريين من ممارسة وتطبيق هذا التراث كوسيلة أيضا للحفاظ عليه. شكرا لك، وأتمنى أن أكون قد أجبت على السؤال.
Thank you so much, Shaher. It's always good to get your insights into this, particularly because I suppose for the audience, it will be interesting to see this marriage, if you like, between agricultural specialists, which are highly technical specialists, with thinking about art and culture in a way that I think is quite novel. It brings together, if you like, a new dimension into which I hope is being conveyed as part of this project, an innovative way to think about the kinds of decisions or the kinds of evidence base, if you like, that we might need to start to pull together in order to be able to start making important decisions or important considerations towards a pathway towards the future. So thank you so much for those insights. Esra, I just want to make sure that you have an opportunity, no need if you don't want to, but would you like to offer any additional insights into this idea of heritage and cultural heritage as either part of or more wider than agricultural cultural heritage?
أنا ليزا، شكرا لك وشكرا لكل الموجودين معنا. حابة أوضح شغلة للأستاذ محمود، إنه أنت بتعرف إحنا بطبيعتنا زراعيين كأرض زراعية، فأي حرفة أخرى عم تجي من الزراعة. إذا بدنا نقول مثلا على سبيل المثال أن صناعة الأحذية بدها تجي من الجلد اللي هو عن طريق تربية عنا الأغنام والماعز والأبقار. فأي حرفة بدنا نستخدمها نوه إلها رح نكون نأتي للزراعة. من خلال مشاركاتنا وجولاتنا الميدانية طبعا كان في كثير من المشاركات سلطوا الضوء على قديما لما كانوا مساء مثلا شو بيعملوا مساء، يعني لما بدهم يجتمعوا كبنات والكبار السن، فهم إما بينسجوا من منتجات الحيوانية من الصوف، أو هاي بيعملوا المخدات والفراش والهاي. هو هذا موروث زراعي عندنا، يعني ما في بيت سوري ما كان سابقا إحنا بنسميه الفراش. هذا شيء ورث، يعني لازم نفوت ونشوف الفراش محطوط عندنا. يمكن هذا شيء تقليدي أي بيت سوري موجود عنده. بتلاقي دائما الحصير، المنتجات من القش، من سعف النخيل، هاي موجودة بأي بيت موجود سوري. يمكن كان كثير شد انتباهي إنه هذا التراث قام يندثر، قام يتجلى بعض الشيء. يمكن هذا البحث أناد بعض المشاركين اللي كانوا معنا إنه فكرة إيه بالفعل إنه إحنا كنا هذا وآبائنا وأجدادنا يحكوا لنا إياه، إحنا ما قام نحكي لأولادنا. يمكن مشاغل الحياة بتركيا صعوباتها ما جعلت هالموضوع قريب لذهن المشاركين. بالفعل توسعت الرؤية. بعض المشاركين كان عندهم إنه يا ريت حتى يكون في توزيع مثل البروشورات للمدارس باللغات مختلفة للتنويه للتراث، خلينا نقول التراث العام السوري. بعض المشاركات اقترحت بالفعل فكرة حلوة وهي منفذة بالريحانية. هو ما بدي أعمل دعاية عنه، هو المركز بيت المونة. هم عبارة عن تجمع، ذكر الدكتور شاهر، ليس فقط إنه هم زوجات شهداء أو أي، هم مهندسات ودكتورات تجمعوا وبدهم يطلعوا بفكرة ليحاولوا يعطوا فرص عمل لنساء أخريات. فطلعت الفكرة ليس فقط إنه راح نعمل من منتجات زراعية، لا، نناقش على الخشب، حرق الخشب، منتجات من القش، نسج الصوف. هذا قاموا ببيعه وسبب انه لهم مردود اقتصادي، يعني فائدة اقتصادي لعوائلهم. هذا الشيء ممكن عم يطرح الفكرة الجاية انه احنا شلون نحافظ على تراثنا السوري بالبلاد اللجوء، شلون ممكن نوثق هذا التراث، شلون لازم نعطي الهوية السورية ببلاد اللجوء بصمة، خلينا نقول بصمة ببلد اللجوء. أنا بعترف أنه كثير من السوريين أعطوا بصمتهم بالمهارات اللي يمتلكونها، سواء كانت زراعية، صناعية، حرفية، علمية. احنا شفنا بأورفا معمل قائم على الأبحاث العلمية اللي هي الزراعة المائية، إنتاج الفطر المحاري، عبارة عن مهندسين زراعيين سوريين. فهاي كلها التجمع، احنا شلون بدنا نقوم البصمة بدولة اللجوء اللي احنا فيها. اتصور هاي مهمتنا احنا، نوصل صوت اللاجئين السوريين، ونضع بصمة لتراثنا بأي دولة نكون فيها. أتمنى أكون وضحت الصورة لحضرتك، وأتمنى تطلع بالفعل على الفيلم. هو لا يعكس فقط تراث الأغاني السورية، هو يعكس ويعطي بصمة الإنسان السوري ببلاد اللجوء.
Thank you all. Thank you very much for your answer.
Thank you so much, Esra. Such a nice comment and such an important way of kind of trying to round out that discussion. So I really appreciate those insights. And I suppose at the end of those comments, one of the things that I was reflecting on as everybody was speaking is just how important this is to a sense of identity, which in terms of displacement is so critical as you're moving either from within Syria or to other places. What you are creating and taking with you in times where it's not necessarily so clear how the future might unfold, if you like. I want to bring in next, if we can, and if it's possible, Carol Palmer, who's actually our host for this session. So I'm so grateful that she can be here, but she's put a really important comment in the chat box, and I'm not sure if everybody can see it. So what I'm going to do while we're trying to get Carol to kind of be able to hopefully contribute verbally is just to sort of reiterate her comment for everybody in the webinar, and maybe we can gauge some reactions while we get Carol on board. But her point, and I thought, which was great, which was developing from some of the conversations we had, is that the idea of thinking about culture holistically as, if you like, a source of knowledge, and the depth of knowledge that is there is important consideration, particularly in these decision makings. So her comment is, so it's about what it's like to be close to the land and experience it day by day. The key difference is that the Fellaheen work to be risk averse and preserve those networks and work day by day within the context of their environment. So in other words, very sensitive to their environment, whereas this contradiction and potentially big tension is that modern economies are really trying to skill up people in order to be able to maximize production, and perhaps might be less sensitive to the environmental variability or family-based nature of knowledge and practice. Are we able to get Carol? Carol, would you, I've just reiterated what you said, but yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry I wasn't able to join as the host. I have two hats. One is as the director of CBRL, and thank you to you for giving CBRL the opportunity to. Sorry, I've been messaged as well. For giving CBRL the opportunity to be host for this. But I think, as many people may know me, actually my specialism is as an ethnographer, and particularly of Hayat al-Falahin, of the life of the Falahin and Bedouin, and I had the privilege some years ago to live with people in northern Jordan and also subsequently work with other communities, and really to, yes, value this knowledge, but to see this contradiction. Thank you for reading out what I wrote. To see this contradiction in how can we get these two worlds to meet. So we have a traditional life, for want of a better word, traditional, which this literally thousands of years of knowledge, and working with this highly vulnerable environment that is the Levant. How can we, and working with primarily practice-based and oral culture, how can we sort of use that knowledge as the basis for moving forward to produce food, to have food sovereignty, but also to work in a contemporary world where a lot of the crops have changed. It's moved over more to cash cropping. Life is more expensive. There are certain constraints, and also moving from a world that's primarily oral, which is the songs element of it, so much as maintained through the songs, the work songs, which can be amended but substantially stay the same, and a sort of written culture that we have of modern humanitarian intervention, where it's hard to put this life into a Gantt chart, and this is what we depend upon for funding. So I'm just posing the problem, and how to bring these together with flexibility and sensitivity to the needs, the constraints of the structures that we operate in.
Thanks a lot, Carol. And I guess just to build off on that and a little bit, and then I might open it back out to the team for some comments, or to the audience if they have comments too, is, one of the questions I didn't articulate it particularly well inside some of those tensions is the idea that in order I'm going to pose it as a question. The idea that in order to be part of a decision-making pathway, that actually you have to valorize or make into an asset something that is intangible, just in order to be able to participate. So that layer on top of the knowledge that's contained within that asset, but the idea of instrumentalizing that asset in order to be part of a decision-making framework in a humanitarian context or whatever, is really what I was trying to get at in terms of seeking to try and understand how as a whole we try and think about these things, if that makes sense to you. I don't know if it does, but
yes, absolutely, it makes sense. It's how to make it tangible, but somehow retain some of the flexibility that oral culture has.
Yeah, exactly. And without instrumentalizing it in a way that is
absolutely without instrumentalizing it as well. And
yeah, exactly. All right, we have a few minutes left, so I'd like to just invite people to reflect on Carol's intervention there, and maybe come to some of the people in the panel, unless there are other questions. So Shahar, Isra, Rami, and do you have any things that you want to kind of add to that comment, or some thoughts or reflections on what Carol has said there? Who would like to come in? Maybe Rami.
نعم ليزا.
Yes, okay, Shahar, please. Thank you.
شكرا كارول لهذا التعليق المهم جدا، والحقيقة هذا ما يعني كنا نريد أو نحاول الإشارة إليه في ضمن هذا الموضوع الكبير جدا والمتشعب حقيقة. أؤيد فكرة بأن يعني التراث الزراعي، واعذروني لأنني أتحدث عن التراث الزراعي فهذا هو اختصاصي. في ظل الأزمات على سبيل المثال، فإن المزارع أكثر ما يفكر فيه هو النجاة، هو الاستمرار في أرضه واستمرار عمله كما ذكرت، ولا سيما الفلاحين. وسعيد جدا بأن أسمع هذا المصطلح الرائع بتسمية الفلاحين. نعم، وهذا ما نلمسه على أرض الواقع حقيقة. في مثل هذه الظروف القاسية فلا يكون المزارع همه يعني تحقيق إنتاج عالي كبير أو ما شابه ذلك، بقدر ما أن يعود إلى إرثه وإلى ثقافته ليجيب على السؤال البسيط جدا: كيف أستمر وكيف أبقى في الأرض وأستمر في الإنتاج؟ على سبيل المثال، نعم، أدوات الإنتاج أصبحت غالية جدا وغير متوفرة، والمزارع غير قادر على ذلك. فما هو الحل إذن؟ تمت العودة إلى هذا الإرث الزراعي، على سبيل المثال بعدم استخدام الأسمدة الكيميائية والعودة إلى استخدام الأسمدة الطبيعية، أو استخدام طرق زراعية بسيطة كان الآباء والأجداد يستخدمونها نظرا لعدم توفر الآلة في الوقت الحالي. وأنا أتحدث هنا عن يعني الوضع في سوريا على سبيل المثال، وكيف ساهم التراث الزراعي في نجاة القطاع الزراعي بشكل عام واستمرار إنتاج الغذاء. رأينا الكثير من الأمثلة عن مزارعين أيضا غيروا أساليب الزراعة، اختاروا محاصيل بسيطة لا تحتاج إلى التكاليف، طوروا من عمليات الحصاد بالاستغناء عن الآلة، وتم العودة أيضا إلى الطرق التقليدية في الحصاد وما شابه ذلك. إذا بالنسبة لي يعني أرى أن التراث بشكل عام ساهم كما ذكرت سابقا في الاستمرار، سواء كان في إنتاج الغذاء أو حتى تصنيع واستهلاك الغذاء. هناك العديد والكثير من الأمثلة في سوريا وخارج سوريا، كيف تم العودة إلى ما تعلمه الناس من تصنيع الجبنة في سبيل المثال، أو تصنيع بعض المنتجات كالمكدوس والملوخية وغيرها كمصدر غني جدا كان موجود في التراث وتم العودة إليه. ولعلنا هنا عندما يعني نقول في سياسات التدخل، وخاصة التدخل الإنسانية، أن تعود إلى هذا الكنز الكبير، ونحاول معا البحث عن كيفية استخدامه وإدراجه في التدخلات الإنسانية على المدى القريب وعلى المدى البعيد، بما يحقق الأمن الغذائي على مستوى الأسرة وعلى مستوى المجتمع أولا، وعلى المدى القصير، لأننا نتحدث أيضا نريد يعني حلول سريعة، وبنفس الوقت أيضا على المدى المتوسط والمدى البعيد. هذا من ناحية دوزان.
Thank you, Shahar. Yeah, thank you so much for your reflection there. And then in the interest of time, I suppose, of course, Carol, welcome to come back on that if you would like. And then I might throw to the rest of the panel for just a final word on the project or any element of this conversation that you'd like to leave the audience with. Carol, do you have any thoughts on what Shahar had said, or are we happy to...
Happy to get the feedback from the panel and the audience in light of time as well.
Thanks a lot, Carol. Okay, right. Well, I'm going to, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to come to each panel member really separately, just for, if you like, a very succinct, quite brief final comment before we try to wrap up. So Rami, can I come to you first, please?
Thank you, Lisa. Actually, I don't have like anything to add. I would like to thank everyone for being with us today. and hope to see you like again in another projects focusing on like the Syrian heritage. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Rami. Okay, and Shaher, any final brief words?
شكرا ليزا، شكرا لكل المشاركين والمتحدثين. أود أن أقول بأنني تعلمت الكثير من خلال هذا المشروع، واكتشفنا أكثر فأكثر الغنى التراث الذي نملكه كسوريين، وكانت فرصة للاستماع إلى وجهات نظر أخرى وأيضا ثقافات أخرى من مناطق أخرى في سوريا. نحن في سوريا كنا نجهل إلى حد ما بعضنا البعض، وجزء لا بأس فيه من تراثنا السوري بشكل عام. شكرا لكم.
Thank you, Shaher. Isra?
طبعا شكرا لكل أعضاء فريق المشروع. راح أبدأ من آخر جملة قالها الدكتور شاهر، إنه بالفعل كنا نجهل بعضنا البعض. صحيح إحنا بسوريا يمكن المشروع أعطى فكرة كاملة عن المحافظات السورية. فكرة لقائنا بالمزارعين واللقاء اللي كان شبه أخوي، كان عفوي بيناتنا، والزيارات الحقلية جعلتنا أسرة ريفية. يعني رجعنا للسابق. يمكن أنا من دير الزور بالأساس نشتغل بالزراعة، لكن ماني من أسرة تعمل بالزراعة. رجعتني لأصولي، لأصول مدينتي، لما عملت أحد المقابلات إنه دير الزور مشتهرة بمحصول معين، وهذا انتقل التراث من دير الزور إلى تركيا. فبتصور كان فكرة جميلة إنه أعطيناها كلنا كسوريين ببلاد اللجوء. أنا بعتبر بأي دولة لجأ فيها اللاجئ السوري وضع بصمته، ويمكن كان هذا المشروع له فيه بصمة إني أنا شلون بدي أحافظ على هذا التراث عند ابني. صرت أفكر شلون دائما أشرح له عن الهوية السورية وعن هويتنا وعن الأمور اللي كنا نمارسها وإحنا صغار. له بصمة فيني وله بصمة بتصور بكل سوري عايش بدولة لجوء. ما ننسى إنه إحنا مزارعين من الأرض وإليها. وعجبني فكرة مشروع كان بالريحانية منك وإليك، كان الاسم بحد ذاته إنه من الأسرة للأسرة، فهذا تعبير كان جدا رائع. شكرا للجميع، وشكرا لكل لجامعة أدنبرا طبعا لأنه وليزا والكل. شكرا لدوزان، شكرا للجميع على أنه قمنا بعمل بتصور باعتقادي أنه عمل رائع. شكرا ليزا إليك.
Ezra, thank you so much. That was such a poetic way of putting it. So thank you so much for those words. We really appreciate it. I'm going to turn to Anne now, as somebody who was an architect of this project, really to kind of leave us with some final thoughts before I conclude, because I want to also say some thank yous. So Anne, please.
Yeah, I don't have much to add. I just wanted to reiterate what Lisa said earlier in her presentation. This project was really an opportunity for us to center Syrian perspectives on farming and sustainable development. One thing we've seen in our research over the years is that a lot of development interventions in the field of agriculture, say when it comes to vocational training, when it comes to microcredit and so on, in the field of refugee labor more broadly, are still designed in a top-down manner and without taking into consideration the perspectives and the expertise of refugees themselves. But what I hope we've been able to document is that the real experts in the room are the Syrians. It is the Syrian farmers who have brought an tremendous amount of knowledge and practices to Turkey. And as you've heard a number of examples today, Syrian farmers in Turkey have introduced new products such as molokhia and aubergine and Syrian-style aubergine. They have built entirely new supply chains. They have brought new high-tech technologies. They have also brought low-tech forms of farming, which are particularly relevant when it comes to climate-proofing agriculture in the region, which we know is particularly affected by climate change and water scarcity. So just to reiterate that, to the address to policymakers and those who design development interventions, it's really an opportunity to take into account the expertise which is already there and which is held by Syrians themselves. On a final note, just like Esra, I love all the different heritage initiatives that we encountered in the field, such as the Minki wa Eleki project that we saw in Rehanli. It's run by a small women cooperative right next to the Syrian border. And so there's a lot going on from within Syrian communities themselves. There are a lot of small level cultural heritage initiatives. So if you know of these or if you're involved in these, it would be really cool to share them with us and link us up. We're always happy to learn about more initiatives in this field. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anne. That's a great conclusion, I think, to what I hope has been a very interesting session. I hope it's certainly from the project team's perspective, it's been great to have you join us online, and of course that this has been recorded and available later for viewing. It's my duty, I think, to really try to encapsulate my thank you and my gratitude. First of all, to Dr. Carol Palmer, who's with us and who you heard from, who's the director of CBRL, for hosting us in this session and giving this opportunity to try and disseminate some of the work we've been doing together, to share that with the community more widely and to engage in this type of participatory conversations. It's a real privilege to be able to do that, and one that we are entirely grateful for. Of course, I want to thank everybody who has made such a significant contribution to this work. I mentioned Anne was an architect, really, of the project idea. It's a really difficult project to try to bring together what are traditionally otherwise siloed expertise in the arts and humanities, social sciences, and then bringing together as well the scientific perspectives. So thanks very much to Anne, who, if you like, led us down this path and also helped facilitate some of these conversations. My huge thanks goes, of course, to Rami and his team at Douzan. There are a huge number of people behind Rami and his team who are in this workshop invisible, but who are so important. And of those who I just wanted to mention was Ahadi, Rawan, and Mohammed, who have played such a critical part of the conceptualization, the implementation, and the running of this project, and who I hope we will have an extended and sustained partnership with, because the insights that come from that expertise in culture and heritage are really informing a lot of the ways that we choose to work as we move forward within the One Health community. Of course, Shaher and Isra, as part of Syrian academic expertise, we've worked with each other for a really long time, and they're long-standing collaborators and friends with whom we wouldn't be able to do the work. And again, too, they have a huge team of people who are behind the scenes making sure that all of this works. And without their technical expertise, without their ability, and perhaps it hasn't come across in the film, but Shaher and Isra did a huge amount of interviewing, what are really difficult circumstances in the field, and without them the documentary also wouldn't have been able to be formed. I'm going to come to Edinburgh next in a moment, because there's a person who's on the call, Martin, who is joining us actually from Chile, and he hasn't had a voice inside this workshop, but is an incredibly important part of the team too, because he's working behind the scenes in Edinburgh, although he's in Chile now, so on a completely different time zone than the rest of us. And we're so grateful, Martin, that you are able to join and be part of this, such an important part of the community when we were overseas and working together in these conditions. And we're so glad that that you're part of this work. And of course, I mentioned Anne, but And then in terms of this particular session, I do really want to thank all the people who made the Zoom platform happen, and the interpreters who have been working really hard with all the technical support in order to make sure that the translation was seamless. And I hope it has been helpful for everybody to have that, so that we can speak in Arabic and in English and in Turkish as necessary. So with that, I want to just say thank you again to the participants who are online and who stayed with us, for all the work and the interest that you've shown and the curiosity. There's an opportunity, I think, to be in touch with us via, if you want, either through any of the partners, through Douzan, SAE, or through the One Health Field Network. There are web links there. And of course, be in touch with any individuals. We would love to hear back from you how this project has sort of resounded with you, and any reflections that you might have on this work, or how we might take things forward. And with that, I'll close the session and say thanks, and have a good day, good evening, good afternoon. All right, thank you.